Waiting very patiently is Michael Nugent, chairperson of Atheist Ireland. Good morning to you, Michael. How are you?
Good morning, Grant.
I was going to say God give you patience, but given you're an atheist, I probably shouldn't say that. Michael,
evolution has given me patience.
Okay. Michael, you feel that atheist children are being evangelised. What does that mean and why do you say it?
Well, in Ireland, you're obliged to send your child to school, and in most parts of the country, the only realistic option for a family is to send their child to the local school that is run by the Roman Catholic Church. Now, first of all, they mightn't get into that school because our equality laws have exemptions that allow religious schools to give preference to Catholics over non-Catholics, so you mightn't get in. Even if you do get in, the ethos of the school and the purpose of the school is to promote specific religious values during the education, and that's permeated throughout the entire school day. So even if you opt your child out of the formal religious education classes, they're still going to be taught religion throughout the rest of the curriculum. Now, I think because that almost sounds like an invisible discrimination to people who aren't the target of it, the way to look at it, if you are a Catholic, is to imagine if, hypothetically, there was a school in your area and it was the only school in your area and it actively taught children that there was no God. Now, we're not looking for that to happen, but just imagine if that existed. And imagine if you, as a Catholic, were forced to send your child to a school where they were actively taught that there's no God. You'd immediately realise that that's wrong, and it's the same the other way around.
Right. Now, I just want to be clear on this, because even this morning, Michael, we had an announcement of 4 new non-denominational Educate Together schools, which were announced in various parts of the country. Are you being a little dramatic in saying this? There is choice out there for families.
Well, there's 4 schools out of 3,000, and they're not non-denominational, they're multi-denominational, and they still have to adhere to the rules for primary school and the primary school curriculum, which means that they are obliged to integrate religion throughout the curriculum, even though they are multi-denominational.
So if you go to an Educate Together school, you learn about religion? We've
no objection to people learning about religion.
Yeah.
In fact, we think it's important that children learn about religion and other beliefs, including atheism, but they should learn about it in an objective, critical and pluralistic manner. They shouldn't be taught that any particular belief is true, and schools shouldn't celebrate religious festivals, which Educate Together schools do. Now, Educate Together schools are by far the best available option at the moment, but they're still not non-denominational schools, and they are still obliged to follow the rules for national schools, which include this religious integration.
Do atheist parents, and I'm sure you've spoken to some, do they feel that they nearly have to hide their views and that their child has to go along with the majority?
Well, it's even worse than that. We had a meeting with the Taoiseach and the Minister for Education during the week about these issues, and as part of the meeting we brought along a parent and a teacher and a student who face discrimination, religious discrimination in schools in their various circumstances. Now, the parent explained how when he tried to bring his child to get into the local school, the principal told him that his son, as a non-Catholic, is a Category 2 boy and would only be considered for admission if there were places left over after all the Category 1 boys who are Catholics had been considered. The student and the teacher were in an even worse situation. They were not even in a position to let people know that they were meeting the Taoiseach and the Minister for Education because they were concerned about further discrimination and recriminations if people knew that they were complaining about their situation.
And I heard of one couple being interviewed recently who did not want their name given and wanted their voices distorted. Such was the fear that the school would find out. What's the solution to this? Do we need to set up a different type of school?
Well, ultimately, the state should run education directly. What Ireland does is it gives control of the schools to patron bodies, who in 90% of primary schools is the Roman Catholic Bishop of the area. And this is effectively an abrogation of the state's responsibility to protect the human rights of children in schools.
Now, sorry, Michael, there are some things that the state run that others would argue if it weren't run by the state might be run more smoothly.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right there. I'm not saying that it would be perfect if the state run it. What I'm saying is the state are responsible for protecting the human rights of children, regardless of whether or not they run it. You might remember a case last year called the Louise O'Keefe case in the European Court of Human Rights, where a woman who, while she was a child, was abused in school, and she brought a case to the European Court, and she was taking on the government, essentially, and the government's argument was, well, it's nothing to do with us, we don't run the schools, the patron runs the schools. But what the European Court found was that even if they don't directly run the school, the state is still directly responsible for protecting the human rights of the students, and those human rights stretch beyond merely preventing abuse. They also stretch to freedom of conscience, freedom of belief, equality before the law, freedom from discrimination. So the state has a responsibility, regardless of who runs the schools, to ensure that our human rights are respected. Look, if you put it in any other circumstance, if you went to your local hospital, if you had a broken leg and you went to your local hospital and they said, I'm sorry, we can't deal with you, we have to deal with all the Catholic patients first. People would immediately realise that that's not a way to run a public service. If you went to your police station to report a crime and they said, sorry, we have to deal with all the Catholics that are reporting crimes first, people would immediately realise that's not how state funds and resources and services should be run. And it's exactly the same with education.
There are about 350,000 people, according to the last census, who either say they've no religion or didn't state a religion on the census. Now, maybe in Kildare, because of our population, there's a bit of a choice about where you can go to school or whatever. But take a typical Irish village where there's one primary school and one secondary school run by the local Catholic Church, for want of a better phrase. What are the options for those parents? Does the child just have to grin and bear it?
Well, there's no option really. I mean, some parents are baptising their children, even though they're not really Catholics, in order to get into the school. We had a case last week. We regularly get parents complaining to us that we pass on to the Irish Human Rights Commission. One of them recently was told that there was a place in the school, that there are two places left in a local school, but they could only get the place if they baptised their child by the following week. Now, they wouldn't dream of asking a Muslim to convert to Catholicism in order to get a place that exists, so why would they ask an atheist to breach our conscience in the same way? I think the figure, by the way, is much higher than the 350,000, because there are regular polls, including ones endorsed by the Roman Catholic Bishops' Conference, that suggest that 10% of Irish Catholics don't believe in God. 10% of people who say that they're Irish Catholics don't actually believe in God. So the figure could be anywhere from 500,000 to 700,000 around the state, all of whose consciences are being breached.
Well, I don't think anyone can be in any doubt that there's a certain level of a la carte Catholicism in this country, and I don't think I'm going to offend anyone by saying that. When you see on Christmas Day churches out the door, Confirmation Day packed to the gills, and then the next day there's no one there. One day hanging out of the rafters, the next day not. Michael, going to have to leave it there, but thank you very much. Michael Nugent there, who's chairperson of Atheist Ireland, on why some atheist children are being evangelised.